markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks are advancing. We have the NASDAQ up more than 2%, 347 points at 16,545. We have the Dow up more than 1% at 513 points. The S&P 500 up more than 1.5%, 94 points. The two-year yield at 4.07%. That's up 10 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.01%, and that's up 6 basis points. We have spot gold higher, 2,418 an ounce. Brent crude, $78 a barrel. WTI crude, $75 a barrel. Moving the markets, that would be dating app Bumble, now down 34%, slashed its annual revenue outlook. Energy drink maker Monster Beverage also lower, down about 10% right now. Let me move my screen over. Yep, 10%, missed second quarter profit estimates. And then you have donut maker Krispy Kreme. They're up 13%. Reported earnings for the second quarter, a Citi analyst, John Tower, said it came in better than feared. And investor Kathy Wood was busy during the stock market sell-off. She scooped up shares in Amazon, AMD, Roku, Reddit, and Meta. It came just as her flagship fund sank to a new 2024 low. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Alex.
All right, thanks so much, Lisa Mateo. Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news in business and finance and economics through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. They cover 2,000 companies and 130 industries worldwide. Michael Halen is one of them, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Restaurant and Food Service Analyst. He's joining us on restaurant brands earnings because they weren't great. There was some weakness in areas like Papa John's and Burger King. Michael Halen joins us now. Michael, what happened here?
What happened there is similar to what we've seen for a lot of our international quick service companies, right? Weakness in the United States, weakness in China, continued weakness in the Middle East due to the Israel-Hamas war. All of those are going to weigh on system-wide sales in the second half. The stock's actually up a little bit, though. I think, this was a case where the results weren't as bad as feared. Management's going to be able to cut G&A spending pretty good here this year to be able to hit their adjusted EBITDA guidance.
So what are management saying in your space, the restaurant space, Mike, about the consumer here? What are they saying? Because, boy, I think they'd be one of the areas that have a really good sense of what the consumer's doing.
Yeah, what I like to say, restaurants are the canary in the coal mine, and our business has been slowing for a year, right? And most of the companies that we cover, the management teams, a lot of the analysts out there had expected a bounce back in the second quarter. It improved from the first quarter, but not by nearly as much as people thought. And then to make matters worse, things are getting worse here in July, right? And so, management teams are talking about continued weakness through the second half. There's, a lot of the companies are issuing pretty wide guidance ranges for the second half and basically admitting that they don't know where things are going here. So, in a lot of cases, we expect further guidance cuts through year end. What we're really concerned about at this point is that some of this restaurant weakness is going to actually spread to middle income consumers. Based on how bad the July numbers were, it may have, and it may be.
Wouldn't that weirdly then be good for like a Burger King?
Well, no, somebody like Burger King, about 30% of their transactions are with low-income consumers, right? And so a lot of them are attracting more higher-income consumers, right? But and those people are good because they buy a lot of high-margin products, right? Premium products and stuff like that. But the sheer number of low-income consumers falling out of quick service occasions is dwarfing the amount of high-income consumers they're attracting. So it's not good for quick service. They're better, I think they're in a better situation than full service chains because people aren't paying for appetizers or alcohol or desserts, and they're not paying a tip on that occasion, right? And so I think quick service is
that's not cool.
In a much better place. It just makes the bill that much cheaper, right? And for that reason, with consumers struggling, we think they're we think they'll continue to outperform full service chains.
So, Mike, what can quick service restaurants, and by the way, Restaurant Brands International, its ticker is QSR, which I think is very cool.
That's really cool.
Smart. What can quick service restaurants like a Burger King and McDonald's, what can they do on the cost side, Mike, when their top line is challenged? Because I figure you got to have as many people in the back making the stuff as you can't cut there. Really, what do you do?
Yeah, it's tough, but management said that G&A is going to be down this year, partly due to lower incentive comp, right? They're not going to hit their targets, and so that'll help things a little bit. You could see restructurings of some of these organizations, right? Try to do less, try to do the same amount of work with a lower head count, right? We could see that occur in the second half and into next year if things continue to be weak. But for franchisees, it's tough because they're asset-light businesses to begin with, right? The franchisees, they're the ones paying for all of the expenses in the restaurants, right? And so, these corporate franchisors, they have very strong margins and they're asset-light, and so there's not really a ton of places where they typically can go and take costs out of the business.
Right. So what happens to margins? Because if the top line is going to struggle, they can't take any more costs out. Where do margins go?
Yeah, well, franchised businesses like quick service, their margins stay pretty steady, right? Because their franchisees are still paying them 5-6% of top line, still have to pay them every time they open a store, right? And so those margins are pretty steady. It's the companies that own all of their restaurants, right? Typically full service, also fast casual like Chipotle and Shake Shack. There's a lot more operating leverage in that model. So to your point, 100%, when same store sales go down, margins get crushed, right? And so that's where our bigger concern is, right? It's our companies that own and operate all of their units because, they're going to suffer the most margin contraction.
All right, my favorite name in your complete coverage list is Cracker Barrel. Give me the latest on Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, Cracker Barrel's had a tough go of it. The relatively new CEO is doing some work there to try to make that brand more relevant, right? They have not done a very good job of attracting Gen Y and Gen Z customers and bringing them into the brand, right? And so a lot of their focus is going to be re-engineering the menu. They're doing more advertising during NASCAR events and NFL. They're actually going to remodel the stores, which that has been like a good investment case for that company because their CapEx spending was so much lower than everybody else because you don't have to renovate an old country store, right? But they've realized that the younger consumers want to eat in a better, nicer restaurant, right? And so they're actually going to start remodeling the stores now too, which we think is a good idea. We think they have to re-engineer the layout of the store personally. We've been saying for a few years now that the retail areas in the front of the stores are too big and that management should think about kind of decreasing the size of that retail store and increasing the dining room so that when they're really busy on the weekends, they can fit, get more people through.
Now, here's the thing, dude. You like to wait out in front on the rocking chairs while they call your name, and then you wind your way through this crazy retail space in front, bump into like 1,000 people. Then you get to the person who seats you. That's the whole thing.
So, funnily enough, I thought I'd never been to a Cracker Barrel. I think I went to one when I was like 10.
Okay.
Because you're describing the rocking chairs is resonating, the store thing is resonating.
Totally.
I would think that is the label and the brand to change that would be weird.
He knows what he's talking about. Mike Kalin, he covers all the restaurants for Bloomberg Intelligence, giving us the latest on some of this business here. I worked at a McDonald's, Olden Avenue, Trent, New Jersey. I lasted 3 days.
Oh, nice.
I was the French fry guy.
Oh! Did you get
French
burned?
Fry guy.
That feels
yes.
Yeah, that feels bad.
So it was. I went to go. It was so bad. I left that to go work in a gas station.
I worked in a restaurant for 9 years.
9 years?
Yeah. I was a bus girl. I was a waitress. I was a coat check girl. I was a hostess.
And where was this?
It was in the city, Upper West Side.
Really?
Look at you. Yeah. I also, for those of you...
How are your tips?
I mean, Awesome.
Awesome.
Alex,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
come
Alex
on.
Shield.
I mean, there was just that one time where a plate landed on someone's head, but technically that was not my fault. So there was that. All right, we're going to have much more coming up on these markets. You're still looking at a solid rally here underway in the equity market. This is Bloomberg Intelligence.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Shares of Warner Brothers Discovery, they are falling. They're down about 11%. This is a day after the company took a $9.1 billion charge on its traditional TV networks. Bloomberg's Charlie Wells says advertisers have a lot more options now.
When you think about streaming at Warner Brothers, when you think about streaming at Disney, they're actually performing a lot better than people expected. But the issue here is just the bulk of revenue for a lot of these media companies comes not from streaming, but from that terrestrial television where the ad dollars are just stronger.
And on a side note, the Associated Press reporting the NBA says it's entered into a deal with Amazon not accepting Warner Brothers Discovery's offer. Eli Lilly raised its guidance for the second time this year thanks to strong sales for its weight loss drug Zepbound. Meanwhile, its rival Novo Nordisk, well, it recently reported that sales of its weight loss drug Wegovy disappointed. Bloomberg's Shelley Banjo makes the comparison.
Both of them are facing supply issues, but Eli Lilly is starting to see those supply issues ease a little bit. And we actually had a scoop last week from Dave Ricks, the CEO, saying we think we are going to come off of shortage pretty soon.
While we have Eli Lilly up about 7%. We have Novo Nordisk. They're coming back. They're up about 5%. Now, from weight loss drugs to fast food, we have shares of Restaurant Brands International. They own Burger King, Popeyes, Tim Hortons. They are up right now. They're up about 2%, and this is despite sales growing less than expected in the second quarter. We actually heard that same kind of thing not too long ago from Taco Bell owner Yum Brands. Meanwhile, Dine Brands, it says wealthier Americans, well, they're visiting its IHOP and Applebee's restaurants more often. It said it had a drop in visits from lower income customers and an increase in guests from households that make about $100,000 a year or more. That is your company news at this hour. I'm Lisa Mateo, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Happy Friday to Paul Sweeney. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We are broadcasting to you live from Interactive Broker Studio right here in Midtown Manhattan. Also check us out on YouTube. We cover pretty much everything through our lens of our Bloomberg intelligence analyst. We also make sure you are up to date on world and national news. And for that, we go to John Tucker. John?
All right, Paul and Alex. Austrian security officials say the main suspect of the two arrested in a foiled plot to attack now canceled Taylor Swift shows in Vienna fully confessed to his plans to kill as many people as possible outside the concert venue. Officials telling reporters in the Austrian capital they found ties to the Islamic State group when the 19-year-old began working on his attack plans back in July, that he quit his regular job and changed his appearance and adapted to Islamic State propaganda. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz making a Midwest swing this week with J.D. Vance visiting some of the same states. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more.
For Harris and Walz beginning in Michigan and Wisconsin, Harris calling them happy warriors.
Do we want to live in a country of freedom, of compassion, of rule of law?
Walz going directly after Trump.
He mocks our laws. He sows chaos and division amongst the people.
And J.D. Vance defending the name-calling.
Look, I think the president, obviously, he loves to give people nicknames.
And Trump on Fox.
There's never been a ticket like this. This is a ticket that would want this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner.
Just the beginning form of what we can expect into November. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Meantime, Donald Trump has scheduled a news conference this afternoon in Florida. We'll carry that live. That's expected around 2 Eastern. Tropical storm Debbie making landfall again this morning, even as residents of the South deal with Debbie's initial blow. The Debbie came ashore near Bulls Bay, South Carolina. Heavy rain and possible flooding possible all the way up through the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast by this weekend. And in San Diego, it is pandemonium at the San Diego Zoo. The new Chinese pandas have arrived.
Yes.
They were unveiled today. The first to be in the United States come here in 20 years from China. And you can watch the panda cam. They're basically laying on their bellies, eating bamboo shoots.
But look at, they're so cute when they do that. Look at them eat bamboo.
They're not the most agile, are they?
Well, they'd also rip your face off if you went in there. It's not like
so
cute, cuddly little teddy bears either. You got to be careful. Anyway, global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg.
Just, if you're sad, just look at your panda cam.
Yeah, panda cam.
You know?
Yep.
If I were a good reporter, I'd find out their names, like Zingling and Wingding.
But the panda cam. It'll make me feel better when the U.S. volleyball team doesn't do well in the women's match right now, which is really stressing me out. Okay. Let's get to something else that stresses people out. Not me, but I'm guessing maybe Paul's daughter, because she lives in the city, right?
Crazy. Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Okay,
That's
so
where
here.
the kids live.
Okay, fair enough. I also live there. Therefore, I'm a kid. This
yeah.
is though about Manhattan, and apparently Manhattan renters are seeking out smaller apartments in an effort to avoid paying ever larger rent bills. The average size of an apartment leased in July was 945 square feet. That's 9.5% less than the same month a year earlier. And this is according to Miller Samuel and the brokerage Douglas Elliman Real Estate. I don't know. Is that a one-bedroom? 945 square feet is pretty good in Manhattan. Yeah, I feel like that was the size of. I think I lived in like a 600 square foot 2-bedroom when I was 23.
Really? Well, I guess 1986 when I moved to the city, nobody lived in Brooklyn. We just all lived in the city. Upper East Side, East 93rd Street. I think a 2-bedroom was $2,200, and we had 3 people living in there, so it was fine.
No way. $2,200 would get you like a studio.
Yeah. I know.
Like
The mortgage on my one-bedroom condo on West 77th Street was $600 a month.
Nice.
But when was
And
that?
what did you do? You sold it. You could have been living large.
I sold it.
When
For a
did-
profit,
Imagine John Tucker living
and the
on the Upper West Side
the
today.
maintenance was $160 a month.
Oh, that's the thing. The maintenance kills you.
Is that it?
Yeah. I mean, my parents have lived in the same apartment for like 49 years, and their maintenance is ridiculous. Anywho, we digress. Apartments are getting smaller. Shocker there. All right, coming up, we got a lot more for you in the next hour. Bloomberg Intelligence. Poonam Goyal will talk to us about Under Armour earnings. This is Bloomberg Intelligence.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are two big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, coming up, we're going to get the latest on these markets with our good friend Natalia. I'm not going to go with the second name pronunciation because I'm going to screw it up. So it's Natalia. All right.
Right?
All right, that's close enough. Poonam Goyal is also going to join us. She's a Bloomberg Intelligence analyst. Get the latest on Under Armour earnings. I want to just ask her about retail. What are the retailers seeing about this consumer out there? Kevin Neer, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Media Associate. I'm going to put him through his paces. He's going to join us to talk to us about Warner Brothers Discovery. What a disaster there. Joe Bruce-Willis, Chief Economist at RSM, our good friend. He's going to join us and get his economic outlook. So a lot coming up this hour. And we kick it off with a highlight. Charlie Pellet.
All right. I thank you very much. Here's what's going on. I thank you, Paul Sweeney, and thank you, Alex Steele. I'm not going to give away the whole plot of Under Armour shares. Ripping higher right now by 18.8%. Poonam will have a whole lot more on what's going on with that stock. Broaderly, though, we have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ 100 index, Russell 2000 solidly in the green today. Stocks staging a relief rally. Bonds falling after the labor market reading this morning at 8:30. Jobless claims helped ease fears about a more pronounced slowdown in the U.S. economy. All major groups in the S&P 500 are advancing right now. We've got the S&P up 1.8%, up 95 points, very close to 5,300, 52.94 right now. The Dow up 548, up by 1.4%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 2.1%. The NASDAQ 100 Index up 2.3%. Broad-based rally. Russell 2000 now up by 1.8%. The 10-year, 3.99%. The 2-year, 4.04%. Spot gold up $30 the ounce, up 1.3%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.1%. 76.08 for a barrel of WTI. As for the overall market backdrop, Sitara Sundar is global equity strategist at JP Morgan Chase.
I think over the next couple of months, you will see volatility, whether it's positioning, whether it's macro, whether it's earnings. But at the end of the day, we are investing for the long term. We're guiding our clients to invest for the long term. So what that means is stock prices trade on fundamentals and earnings growth over the long run.
Sitara Sundar of JP Morgan Chase. Eli Lilly looking at a big move there, up 7.5%. It moved ahead in the race to dominate the red-hot obesity market as rival Novo Nordisk struggles to keep up with demand. Sales of its blockbuster Zepbound, $1.2 billion in the second quarter, smashing Wall Street's estimates of $819 million. Lilly, again, up 7.6%. Novo Nordisk, the ADR is up by 5.2%. So again, recapping, big relief rally underway. S&P up by 1.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so very much. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. Happy Thursday / happy Friday to Paul. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. Let's get you more caught up in these markets because some of those individual movers are really big. And I feel like a big theme is, hey, it could have been worse. And that's why the stock is basically rallying. Natalia Knežević is joining us. She's a Bloomberg Equities reporter, former producer, one of my buds. Let's start with Bumble. careful because that's a legitimate downside when they wind up changing their sales forecast.
So that's true. The stock is now on pace for its biggest decline on the record. So they cut revenue outlook pretty dramatically for this year, from 11% to a range between 1 and 2%. Basically, the biggest question for analysts is that the revenue model doesn't look like it's working now. They did an upgrade in April for interface design, and of course, the biggest target was to get those like younger users, but it doesn't look like it has been working, which is also a contrast with its rival. But the company at the same time on the earnings call, they said that they upgraded some AI features, so probably we will see some response in the stock prices as well. But as of today, the stock is down, and I checked the options market, and I see that some people are betting that the stock price will move to $3.5. Now it's 5.4.
Oh, wow. So even more downside to go on that.
Natalia is a graduate of St. Petersburg State University in Russia. I'm looking on the map here. It's right on the Gulf of Finland. It looks really awesome.
It's actually like 2 hours by car from Finland. You can go there for like shopping or
like really cold. You shop in Finland? That's like a thing?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey, but you go.
It's on the Gulf of Finland. It looks very cool. I think we do a little remote from there. So anyway, what else do you have for us here today as I look at your university?
Of course, Eli Lilly is front and center today. The company boosted its outlook for the second time. It sees strong sales across its weight loss as well as diabetes drugs. And of course, it's interesting to compare with Novo Nordisk, which missed estimates. But I have to say, healthcare sector more broadly is so interesting during this earnings season. If we will look at positive surprise in earnings across all of the S&P 500 sectors, healthcare is the best one.
Yeah, interesting, and and the extreme reaction to the numbers as well. I mean, that was the whole point, right? Zepbound kind of eating in a little bit to Novo Nordisk there. Let's end on Under Armour. Stock is up with 20%.
Right. So the company beat earnings and boosted its outlook as well. But for me, the biggest takeaway was the global kind of outlook. If we compare sales across the world, yes, sales in North America and EMEA regions, they were better than expected. In Asia, still a little bit slow. However, despite this positive stock reaction, some analysts are pretty cautious. So, for example, Citigroup is saying that, yes, North America sales beat consensus, but the region is still, quote, very, very weak. And again, speaking of options, I see lots of positivity. People are betting that the stock price will move much, much higher.
I'm looking at the website for St. Petersburg State University.
I knew it. He's on his phone the whole time.
Totally zoned out. It is a beautiful looking campus. The problem with the website is it's in Russian.
Right. Well,
so, but the pictures,
she speaks Russian, so.
The pictures are awesome. It looks like a beautiful thing right on the water there.
It's a huge campus near the river. It's very beautiful.
Did you like your experience there?
I wasn't the best student, I should say.
I find that so hard to believe.
That's not the answer. That's not the question. Did you enjoy yourself?
I did. It was a really good time.
City. It looks like
the city is so beautiful. It's like Venice.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, to be clear, Natalia is insanely smart. So
she
in no way do I believe that. She works harder than anyone else in this building.
And then she comes to New York University and gets her master's in business journalism. So there you go. But I mean, I'm down for St. Petersburg State University. I mean,
next trip.
Remote.
All right, Natalia, thanks a lot. Natalia Knežević joining us, Bloomberg's equities reporter. Let's keep going on Under Armour here. The stock up by 20%. Poonam Goyal is senior U.S. e-commerce and retail analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. She joins us now. What part of this is like, whew, it could have been worse versus we really like this stock and its growth?
I think, they're executing, right? This is the start, but make no mistake, they have a long, long way to go. I think the fact that they beat expectations is a good sign that they've stopped the bleeding and it's getting better, but getting to positive sales is still going to be a long while. In fact, before we see actually some meaningful improvement in product, which is a key part of the story, it's not going to be for another 9 to 12 months. So there's still a lot of time. The environment is still very fickle. And, when you look at their guidance, which they did raise, it doesn't suggest that things are getting materially better. In fact, there's a little bit of caution built into the guidance as they expect Asia Pacific region to get weaker. They're having freight expense pressures and also Forex pressures. So it's not all rosy as it seems looking at the share price, but they are making improvement.
what do they need to restructure here? Or do they just need to have more cooler stuff in the stores?
I think it's everything. It's definitely product. Product is king in retail, and they do need to improve their product positioning as well as what they offer. Aside from that, they also have to improve how they market this product. Under Armour has gone through these restructuring efforts multiple times now. So this isn't something new to them. They've over-penetrated in the off-price category. They've over-discounted. They've become basically a promotional banner. And now they're trying to do what they tried to do again previously, is to restructure themselves as a more premium brand. Can they do it? Yes, but it's going to take effort and time, and they have the means to do it. They have the expertise, but remember, they're a much smaller brand than a Nike or an Adidas, so they don't have those deep pockets to help them, but it will take time for them to actually get this underway.
Also, isn't this like a really rough time to try and like be a premium brand?
It's tough, but Under Armour isn't a dead brand, right? Everyone still recognizes Under Armour, and it isn't a brand that has kind of died and is not coming back to life. People recognize the name. People still use it in sports. They have 70 athletes across 28 teams in the Olympics right now. So it's not dead. And yes, it can be repositioned, but it will take time.
So in this part of the retail space that you cover, Poonam, the Nikes, the Under Armours of the world, the Adidas, which is correct way to pronounce it.
Oh, Matt Miller, is that you?
Yes, he's rubbing off on me. How's the consumer there in that part of the world?
So the consumer isn't in the best place today. We've seen the consumer indicators, whether it's the unemployment rate, which we closely watch, is now over 4%. They're lofty. Amazon said it on their call just last week that they do expect consumer volatility and macro pressures to build. There will be more discounting. So, the consumer is choosing, they're being picky, they're trading down, they're pulling back. It's not the best consumer environment heading into the back half.
So how much time do we need to give then, say, Under Armour to fix all of this? Because what is idiosyncratic versus the macro environment? That feels like it's going to draw this process out a bit.
It's definitely going to draw it out a little bit, especially if it worsens. We heard them say that promotions will tick up, which was a major driver to better gross margins in the second quarter. That was really a large part of the outperformance there. But that said, you're talking about a 10% decline in North America, double-digit declines in the quarter still, expecting double-digit declines in the rest of the year, their fiscal year. It's a long way before we can see, continuous positive growth. I'd say, definitely well over a year, if not longer.
All right. Poonam Goyal, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Poonam Goyal, she is our senior analyst covering all the retail stuff for Bloomberg Intelligence, giving the latest here on our good friends at Under Armour, based in Baltimore, Maryland. Kevin Plank is the founder of that thing. Pretty good story there overall, but as Poonam mentioned, a lot of competition. They need to restructure a little bit there. All right, that's a pretty decent story here today. I'll tell you what's not working today. Warner Brothers Discovery. I don't know. When I covered these stocks, they were ripping. But I don't know, this new generation of media analysts, I don't know what they're doing here. Kevin Year, he joins us here. He's a senior media associate for Bloomberg Intelligence. He works with my good buddy, Geetha Ranganathan, covering the media space here. Kevin, this is a tough one here. I mean, talk to us about what's happening with Warner Brothers Discovery, taking a big write-down today. What was the write-down for?
Exactly. And thanks for having me on, Paul. It's bad. It's not great. Obviously, we're still in a very transitory period in media. Expectations were certainly tempered coming into the quarter. I think they've been that way for a little while now. Obviously, Warner stopped giving us adjusted EBITDA guidance at the beginning of the year. But that said, it was worse than expected. And it's really, I think the headline is on the network side, as you just said. That's where that $9 billion write-down was coming from. And the visibility isn't great. They're going to be losing, it's all but certain they're going to be losing the NBA contract in 2025-26. So it's really been a game for a long time for traditional media. Can they scale up their streaming services while pay TV continues to melt? But it's tough.
But their streaming wasn't terrible. It was really just the traditional ad business and also the movie business. Like Dune 2, fine, like I'll see it, but please, you ain't no Deadpool.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The ads were really where they were feeling a lot of the weakness as, you know, those linear ad dollars are moving towards connected TV. Streaming was pretty good. They had some nice international launches during the quarter, so those net ads came in above expected. And they are actually one of the few that are starting to get to the inflection point where we're starting to see some profit. But again, it's so much smaller compared to their legacy TV business. That's still the bread and butter. And on the studio side, you're right. They had some good results with Dune. They had a good launch with Godzilla x Kong. They also had some misses. Furiosa was one that didn't quite do as well. And of course, on the video game side, that's also been quite weak, especially against some difficult comps against last year with the Hogwarts Legacy.
All right, $16.7 billion market cap. That's one thing. But then you look at the balance sheet, and they got $40 billion of debt.
Oh my God.
What is this company? I mean, John Malone's a shareholder,
right.
An agent of change, if nothing else. Is there an expectation in the marketplace, Kevin, that this is a company that needs to be restructured, split up, acquired? I mean,
it's certainly been speculated on. Management, of course, declined to comment on rumors like that. They're certainly prioritizing their cash flow to pay down their debt right now. Certainly, a lot of that is going towards their interest payments. It's difficult to say. It's really, really difficult. Obviously, when you look across kind of the media landscape, they are partnering together with bundling. Obviously, we have Venue Sports coming this fall. So
what's that again? Help me understand that one.
It's the streaming sports JV. Essentially, they're going to be it's like a skinny pay TV bundle. So essentially, you're getting those cable TV channels, but it's all over the internet, right? So again, that's Warner, that's Fox, that's Disney's ESPN.
But it's not NBC Universal.
It's not NBC Universal. It's not Paramount, CBS Sports.
It's a disaster. It's a disaster. We had, when I was running this industry, we had people paying their cable operator $100 a month. The cable operator made money. And the cable operator paid a lot of money to the Viacoms and the Warner Brothers Discoveries of the world for their cable networks. They made money. Lots of big audiences. Advertisers made money. Everything was good. And then the young folks come into the industry and they change it. They start the streaming service, and now they're scrambling for dollars. Is there an expectation, Kevin, that we're somewhere near a point where it all shakes out or something?
Yeah, I think so. And you make it sound so wonderful back then.
Even I made money there.
Again, if you look at certainly Netflix is crushing right now. Their margins are so great. They just upped their margin guidance. Cash flow really, really strong, and certainly seem to be winning these streaming wars. But again, it's evolving, right? It's continuing. We're looking at price increases. Obviously, when you're looking at kind of a more mature market like the U.S., the focus is on ARPU. So how are you going to raise ARPU? There are a few different levers.
Average revenue per user.
Exactly. There it is. So you can do that through just price raises. Obviously, they're trying to build out their advertising like we were talking about before. And then the other big lever is the password crackdown. So Netflix did that last year. Disney's going to be implementing that in earnest, and so is Warner Brothers.
Has that been material? Like, did that?
Oh yeah, no, certainly. It really helped.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Netflix, yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay.
The Sweeney offspring were upset because they've been skating on my coattails for a long time.
I guess also the question is, at some point, I don't know if we're here yet, people are just going to get fed up with all the price increases, of which I cannot keep track, and they're going to do the thing where they go through and they're like, no, yes, and they're going to start cutting. Have we seen that yet?
A little bit. Again, if you look at Netflix, their churn levels are so low compared to their peers, but you do see a lot of those serial churners. They'll sign up, they'll watch a show that they like, and then they'll cancel, right? So they're trying to combat that. They're still keeping, again, they being, most of these streamers, they're still keeping that competitive entry price with their ad-supported tier. So what they're trying to do is either you have to pay a lot for a premium product or pay less and watch ads.
All right, Kevin, good stuff. You can come back. You passed the test. Kevin Neer, Senior Media Associate Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence.
No pressure.
I didn't hire him, but Geetha did, so that's good enough for me. That's all I need. He's here at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, and most importantly, he's based in New York City. None of this Princeton stuff. You want to be a player, you got to be in a big town. That's what I always say. Kevin Neer, thanks for joining us here. Markets higher. S&P 500 up 1.6%. The Nasdaq up 1.8%. The Russell, the small cap, participating here today, up 1.6%. Yields. We have the 10-year Treasury 3.98%, up about 4 or 5 basis points here. So we'll keep an eye on that. WTI crude oil. Call that out for Alex. It's up about 1.25%, $76.17. We'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Very close to the highs of the morning with the S&P higher by 88 points right now. A relief rally on a Thursday, up 1.7%. The Dow now surging by 532 points, up 1.4%. 2% jump today for the NASDAQ Composite Index, up 315 points. The NASDAQ 100 Index up 2.2%. The Russell 2000 Index up by 1.7%. 10-year 3.98% with a 2-year 4.04%. Gold up $32 the ounce, up 1.4%. And West Texas Intermediate crude up by 1.2% right now. So stocks staging a relief rally. Bonds fell after this morning's labor market reading. Jobless claims helped ease fears about a more pronounced slowdown in the world's largest economy. We got a major fumble for Bumble today. Bumble shares, they are absolutely plunging, on track for their biggest decline on record after the dating company slashed its annual revenue outlook. Bumble now down by 32.1%. Also, we've got Match shares, rival Match down by 2%. Match is the parent company of Tinder, Match, Hinge, OkCupid, and Our Time. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie Pellet, I don't know why I don't know about these dating apps, Charlie. Just go into a bar the old-fashioned way.
I'm with
Worked
you.
for generations.
Totally, I'm with you. I mean, yeah, absolutely right. That's the way to go.
All right, we'll see how the kids are doing it differently. Good for them. All right, that's Charlie Pellet giving us that latest update here. Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We are streaming live on YouTube as well. So head over to that internet thing and search Bloomberg Podcast. Joe Buswells joins us. He's the chief economist at RSM. They throw a very good golf tournament down in South Carolina. I like the RSM folks. He joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio. Joe, what did you make of Friday's jobs report and kind of the market's response on Friday and then particularly on Monday? What did you make of all that?
All right, so the market grossly overreacted to what was just a soft employment print. Now, my sense is that I like Claudia Sam as an economist. I like her rule. I don't know that it survived the shocks of the pandemic, the policy changes that have gone on, and the immigration that just simply picked up starting about 3 years ago. Now, you know, what happened on Monday was caused in part by the Fed being behind the curve. I was one of the ones out there for months saying it's time for a rate cut, right? Okay, they didn't. Fine. We're going to get one. The Bank of Japan took what looked like a measured step, but clearly unnerved global investors. You'll love this, Alex. I was sitting in my apartment in Paris.
Okay, enough said. I mean, I already love the sentence. Yes. Go ahead.
On Monday morning, and I got to see this happen. For whatever reason, I got up super early, because, you know, guys who were economists, we have second senses. And I noticed we had a sell-off going on, and sure enough, before you knew it, the Nikkei was down 12%, right? All right. My sense is that the problems inside the jobs report are some that are those that will get revised away pretty quickly, meaning there was 1.4 million people not working because of the weather. That's combining part-time and full-time, right? My sense is that 420,000 people entered the workforce looking for jobs. You know why? Because wages are going up, right? We're bringing people off the sidelines. In addition to the number of people who've entered the country both illegally and are not documented, right? So we've got a very healthy labor force. This morning's jobless claims number, what do I see? It declined. Now, I want to put this out there for everybody. From May to August, or at the beginning of May through the end of August, I don't pay a lot of attention to jobless claims. It's rife with seasonality. We've got too many holidays. You got hurricanes, all sorts of distortions. So I look at the 13-week moving average, smooth out the noise over a period of 1 month, and just sort of wait till middle of September to see where we're at. Well, what do we see? Seasonality likely causing that top line number to drop. The big drop in Texas, when I'm not in Europe watching the Olympics. We live in Austin, Texas. There are people without power for 2 weeks. That's what, without power for 2 weeks.
That's that Texas power grid you guys
That's
are so
right.
proud of.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. Yeah.
So, Joe, does that mean that if we have the weakness, though, revised away a bit, that obviously would take the urgency off the Fed. So currently, WIRP is pricing in about 75 basis points of cuts this year, 125 at every meeting. So is that legit then, even if we get revised down?
That's legit.
Okay.
That's our call. And the Fed does need to cut. The inflation rate at 2.5% is too low for an economy that's cooling. Hey, by the way, there's nothing wrong with hiring cooling here. It's a good thing. Firms have been hoarding labor for a number of years. They just
So you
don't
see
need
that,
to
right?
hire. Oh, yeah. Not only do we
then-
see it, we hear
yeah.
it from our clients.
But then if we get any weakness, though, that's their lever, right?
Yep. That's
Firing
right.
people.
That's right. If we get sustained weakness across the economy, as opposed to pockets in down market that have exposure to down market households, right? So McDonald's is having a problem. People who go to McDonald's tend to be down market, right? That's where the stress is. Once you get in the upper echelon of the middle class and then the upper two quintiles, let me tell you, we're not having problems. I've been out there traveling all over the country this summer. It's happening. The economy is strong. You saw what demand for services picked up in the ISM on Friday, right? So, look, this is a classic growth scare. The American economy is a dynamic animal, and every 2 years or so, we tend to get a bit of a growth scare. Back in the day, you'll remember this, Paul, we used to call those mid-cycle corrections.
Yeah.
Now, that's a term that's fallen out of favor that maybe we ought to consider bringing back so we can have a more rational discussion around the risks to the economy that don't distort and disturb financial markets like they have been. But let me say this. If you were shorting the yen, long high tech, using the carry trade, well, you know what? You're taking some pretty serious risks, right? That trade tends to go up the escalator, down the mine shaft. It's what happened, right? I mean, we've all been in the business for a long time. These things occur.
Yep.
And it's good that carry trade's now getting unwind. Our friends over at JP Morgan say it's about 75% of the way through. That makes sense. Probably by the end of next week after, we'll be through it and we'll be back to normal.
Joe, I know you mentioned you're based in Austin, Texas. I'm guessing you're not an Austin, Texas native.
No.
Talk to us about the economy down there, because that's representative of so much that's changed in this country over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of migration, job creation, businesses, relocation. Talk to us about Austin.
But Austin's kind of unique, isn't it? In terms of in Texas?
I think of Nashville, Austin.
Yeah, I would
Florida,
agree.
maybe.
Austin is America's boomtown. Matter of fact, the local ABC news outlet, they just call it Boomtown 2040, right, when they think it'll peak. It's going to go on for a long time.
Really?
You know, if you're there, it's mini Silicon Valley. The great, big, beautiful University of Texas co-eds wear burnt orange hats with the LA Dodgers brand. That's what Austin, Texas is. You really have had a lot of people come from the West, the Northeast, and all around the region. Each April, my wife and I have a fun game. We drive around and we look at the different license plates from all over the country.
Paul would love that game.
Tend to
I feel
show
like that'd
up.
be your
They
jam.
tend to show up in April. No, seriously, from everywhere though. Yeah, and what's
Is there
driving
infrastructure there to support it?
No, there's not. That's being rebuilt, right? We just built a brand new home 2 years ago. There aren't enough homes at all, right? There's enough apartments, but not enough homes. So it's a different situation. Look, it's tech, it's healthcare, and I'm telling you, I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this, Austin becomes the national capital of artificial intelligence. The intellectual property spun out of University of Texas, Texas A&M is grossly understated, and it's really happening. There's a steakhouse downtown that I won't mention, but you can go there any given night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You can see the U.S. military there, full dress, all the medals. Yeah, there. Cyber Command is there. There's a whole nother lever that's just causing that economy to rise.
Well, talking about that, I mean, and then in general, we have about like a minute left, but do you feel that the AI hyperscaler boom is going to be what we all think it is?
I think it'll be different, but I do think it'll be it represents a positive productivity shock to the U.S. economy. We're already using it.
We're already using it.
Yeah. My firm, in my unit, we're using it. It's going to happen.
How are you using it?
Okay, so we've created a machine learning driven forecast for GDP, for employment, and the rest of the high-frequency variables. We're now using it in communications. I'm even using it to spot check, even after 3 decades of doing this job, so that I'm making sure I'm not making mistakes. It's quite impressive, and we think that it's going to make what we do better.
Interesting. All right, Joe, great stuff. Always good seeing you. Joe Brusuelas, Chief Economist for RSM Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, but he is based in Austin, Texas. Another relocated person to that part of the world.
Yeah.
I mean,
we should do a show in Austin.
We could definitely do a show in Austin.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd do it from University of Texas. That'd be fun.
Yeah, but that would also be very cool,
I spent
actually.
a ton of time in Austin because as a sell-side analyst, you go to the state pension funds there. They have a lot of money.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you spend a lot of time in Austin. Great state capital. You're driving up, and out of nowhere, this thing just pops up.
So, I mean, this was like a decade ago when I went down to Houston. Everyone there was trying to tell me, oh, it's not just oil and gas. There's other stuff, too. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, buddy. And I was like, oh, no, that's true.
Yeah.
You were right.
As Joe's mentioning, healthcare, big, and now technology. So, and supposedly no taxes down there? Is that what they keep telling us?
No tax? No, there's some taxes.
There's some
But
taxes?
it's just
Okay.
different
All right,
taxes,
very
I guess.
good.
I don't know.
All right, looking at the S&P 500 up 1.9%, not too shabby. The NASDAQ up 2.3%. So we are holding on to these gains for the day. 10-year Treasury, that's up 4.5 basis points, 4.39%. I'm calling out Bitcoin because Tom Keenan's not here. It is up 7%, $3,900. We're now at 59,000 on Bitcoin. It was 50,000. And now we're at 59,000. How about that? With our news in New York City, here's what we've got.
Hi, Boy and Alex. Authorities now say an alleged attacker detained by Austrian police had been planning to attack concertgoers at Taylor Swift show in Vienna with homemade explosives and knives. Police say the 19-year-old Austrian citizen had likely planned the attacks alone, but was in contact with someone who was slated to work at the concert. They say the suspect has made a confession, and all others allegedly involved in the plot have been detained. Democrats Kamala Harris and Tim Walz warning that former President Trump would overturn the Affordable Care Act and gut Social Security if he returns to the White House. Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick has more on the Democrats' economic message as their campaign moves through the industrial heartland.
That's what you would expect, especially understanding that Trump is running on a positive view of the economy circa 2019. And so Democrats can't simply let him be the candidate who's known for a good economy. They're going to hit him on those issues as much as they can. But it is something that the Democrats seem to be redoubling on after a little bit of a lack of focus on the campaign trail before the current ticket was set.
Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick in the nation's capital. In the meantime, Donald Trump has scheduled a news conference for this afternoon at Mar-a-Lago, and we will carry that live around 2 o'clock on Bloomberg Radio and TV. Russia declaring a state of emergency in a western region as Ukraine's military launched what appeared to be its biggest incursion into Russian territory since the Kremlin's war began more than 2 years ago. And where were you 50 years ago?
Au revoir. We'll see you again.
50 years ago, Richard Nixon became the only U.S. president to announce that he'd resign from office, and he did so the next day. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:40 on Wall Street. Jobless claims Thursday. Stocks are ripping higher. Right to the numbers here. Fast-moving markets to the upside, with the Dow surging 542 points, up 1.4%. S&P up 91 right now, up 1.8%. The Nasdaq Composite Index up 339, up by 2.1%. Nasdaq 100 Index up 2.2%. Broad-based rally this morning. Russell 2000 up by 1.8%. Small cap shares moving higher. Stocks staged a relief rally. Bonds fell after the latest labor market reading helped ease fears about a more pronounced slowdown in the U.S. economy. And with more on the jobless claims data, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
It's the largest drop in almost a year, a surprise move. Weekly jobless claims fell by 17,000 to 233,000 after reaching 250,000 the prior week, a one-year high. The Labor Department's data could suggest the workforce is reverting to a pre-pandemic trend after last week's worrying report that unemployment reached an almost three-year high of 4.3% in July. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
10-year yield 3.98%. The 2-year 4.04%. Gold up $33 the ounce, up 1.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude now up 1.3%. 76.18 now for a barrel of WTI. Under Armour shares up 18.7%. It's out with results that exceeded analyst expectations, also raising its guidance as the athletic wear brand shows signs of improvement under the returning founder, Kevin Plank. Again, Under Armour up by 18.7%. So again, recapping here, major rally underway with the S&P up 89 right now, up 1.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pelt, thanks so much. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We keep you up to date on all the business news and economics and finance that you need with our Bloomberg Intelligence lens, because they cover 2,000 companies and 130 industries worldwide. We also like to dig deep into the amazing reporting here that we have throughout Bloomberg News. And there's a couple things on that point. One is we're going to go to Madison Muller, who's going to talk about Eli Lilly earnings, because that was quite interesting. The other is we're going to talk about Ozempic Town. It's a big take. You can check it out on our podcast. You can check it out in Bloomberg Business Week as well. But it's saying it found the biggest town in the United States that uses Ozempic. It was really cool. Great anecdotal evidence, and I have lots of questions. Madison joins us now in studio. First, just take us through Eli Lilly earnings. Is this a pure, market share grab from Novo to Eli?
Not quite yet. So that's what we've been closely watching. Lilly is narrowing the gap with Novo Nordisk. The sales are coming quite close. I mean, Lilly had $1.2 billion in sales of Zepbound, which only launched a few months ago, and Novo Nordisk had $1.7 billion in sales of its weight loss drug Wegovy, which they reported yesterday. And Wegovy's been on the market for several years. So Lilly is really moving fast. Sales are ramping up extremely quickly, and we are watching closely to see what happens.
I guess the next step for these drugs is, an oral type of
exactly.
pill. Where are we on that? What are the companies saying?
Both companies have been working on pills, which obviously they think could help not only expand the market in the U.S., but expand ex-U.S., because there are certain markets that research has shown prefer pills over shots. Okay. Japan is one of them, interestingly. So that's kind of the next step here. Both of the companies are studying these drugs. Novo, though, has had a lot of trouble with supply, and particularly making enough of the active ingredient that's used in their drugs. The pill uses the same active ingredient, and it uses more of it. So they're kind of struggling right now. They can't really launch that pill until they get a handle on supply.
Let's go to the big... Oh, sorry about that. Didn't turn on my mic. Let's go to the big take, because that was quite interesting, and it feeds into the whole story. Mm-hmm. And the title is What It's Like When Ozempic Takes Over an Entire Town.
By the way, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Great story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Because I spent a ton of time in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Really?
I know of what you speak. And I send it to a buddy who lives there. She knows half the people in the article. That's
really?
How small
that's
it is.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I'm just really curious as to how you found this town.
So we worked with the data team on this story, and we got data at the 3 zip code level. So we're looking at, cities and sort of their surrounding areas. And we were looking all across the country. A few other spots came up, like Huntsville, Alabama, and we kind of were digging around to see just if people were talking about the drugs online, if there were doctors in the area that were prescribing them. And we honed in on Bowling Green specifically because Kentucky as a state has the highest concentration of weight loss drug users in the country. So we were like, oh, well, if this city is showing up in our data, this is probably a good place to go and see what's happening. And so started talking to people there, and it kind of spreads like wildfire. You talk to one person who's on the drugs and they're like, oh, talk to my friend, talk to my neighbor, they're on the drugs too. And it just kind of was easy to find people after that.
Why is that? Why is it the use so concentrated in a place like Kentucky? Is that just simply because there's more people there that qualify from a weight perspective?
Right. I mean, that's a piece of it, which is actually a good thing. I mean, we hear so much about the drugs in New York and in Hollywood, but when we're looking at actual obesity rates, those aren't the places that have the highest concentration of people with obesity or diabetes. In Kentucky, there are high rates of obesity and diabetes. There were large employers in the area that were covering the drugs so people could get access to them. Bowling Green in particular is a very middle class area. So when people couldn't get coverage for the drugs, they were willing to pay out of pocket for it. So that kind of made the conditions ripe for these drugs to take off in Bowling Green.
When you write the article, you also talk about the compound drugs. Can you just walk us through what a compound drug is, why it's allowed, and is it legit?
Yeah, I mean, that has been a really big thing and a really big part of this weight loss drug market as of recently because, and that fits in with this supply issue. Lilly and Novo have really been struggling to keep up with supplies. So when drugs are in shortage officially, these compounding pharmacies are allowed to make similar versions, copycat versions we call them, to help patients who are unable to get prescriptions for the drugs. But what's happened is, in this gap, it's kind of allowed these compounding pharmacies to proliferate, and not all of them are exactly legitimate. And so there's a lot of medical spas that are using the compounding drugs, telehealth companies that are selling the compounding drugs, like Hims and Hers is one that comes up often. And in Bowling Green, it's really taken off as well. There's like all of these medical spas popping up, weight loss clinics popping up that are offering compounded or just illegitimate versions of the drugs. And, that's become a big thing there as well.
Well, for the compounded drugs, are they as effective? Are they safe? What do we know about them?
That's kind of the problem, is because, pharmaceutical products are so tightly regulated and require so many studies from these drug makers, but the compounded drugs are not studied and they're not regulated in the same way. There's not the same FDA oversight. So when we think about, are these drugs as effective? The answer is we don't really know because we don't have studies that prove that indefinitely.
Why would that ever be allowed? I understand it's a tight supply shortage, yada, yada, but then why is it here's an option, take a drug that you don't really know works or what's in it? Why is that allowed?
It's because, normally compounding, the reason that it exists is more on an individual basis. So if a person is allergic to a certain ingredient or a coloring in a drug, compounding pharmacies can tailor make those drugs for that specific patient. Or if a drug is in shortage and a person can't get access to it, it's not really supposed to be, they're not supposed to be acting like drug makers, but that's kind of what we're seeing happening with these weight loss drugs because of the demand for them.
Great stuff. Madison Moeller, your cohorts, co-authors, Devin Leonard and Tanez Merjani?
Mergani, yeah.
Mergani, okay. That's the big take story today, Bloomberg Business Week. What it's like when Ozempic takes over an entire town. In this case, they focused on Bowling Green, Kentucky.
I did in the story, it talked about how there was a wellness thing, and then you also Botox next door because it's a Ozempic face everyone talks about, but you lose all that weight really fast, but then you got all the skin kind of flapping around everywhere. You need the Botox to fix it.
Bowling Green, Kentucky, they make Chevrolet Corvettes, and they make underwear.
Thank you. Thanks for
Fruit
that.
of the Loom is
they
based.
do,
Fruit of the Loom in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Really?
Yeah, so that's what
Let's
they do
also
there.
go there.
That's also
okay.
Go there.
So we have a working
That's
list.
the first Cracker Barrel I ever went to.
Wow, the things
Madison
you
Moeller,
randomly learn.
Health reporter, Bloomberg News, joining us live here in a Bloomberg Interactive Brokerage studio, doing some great reporting on these weight loss drugs, which are really, really becoming a big phenomenon within the healthcare space. We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Bumble shares are now plunging by 32.9%. They're on track for their biggest decline on record after the dating company slashed its annual revenue outlook, signaling that an overhaul of the brand's flagship app has failed to reignite growth. The Austin, Texas-based company said 2024 revenue will gain by 1 to 2% from a year earlier. It had previously forecast growth of as much as 11%. Wall Street was expecting 8.4%. Based on estimates compiled by Bloomberg. Bumble right now down 33%. Rival Match, that stock down by 0.8%. Eli Lilly shares advancing by 7.4%, a company we were just discussing. The drug maker raising its guidance for the second time this year on strong sales of its blockbuster weight loss drug Zepbound. Bloomberg's Shelley Banjo says Lilly looks like it's gaining ground on Novo Nordisk and its own household name, Ozempic.
I think this is sort of a moment in time to say that Eli Lilly might be pulling ahead of this race with Novo to get these weight loss drugs out there. Novo was first, but not necessarily sort of a lesson that like you can be first, but not necessarily best. You can be second and come from behind, and that seems to be the case, at least for right now.
Bloomberg Shelley Banjo, and right now we do have Lilly up by 7.5%. Novo Nordisk shares, they're up by 5.2%. Microsoft and Palantir Technologies are combining their government cloud computing and artificial intelligence tools in a bid to sell software, including OpenAI's GPT-4, to U.S. defense and intelligence agencies for top secret tasks. And those are our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pellet, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Happy Friday to Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We are broadcasting to you live from my Interactive Broker studio right here in Midtown Manhattan. We keep you up to date on all the business news that you need. Plus, we bring you world and national news. And for that, we go to John Tucker. John.
All right, Alex and Paul, the alleged attacker detained by Austrian police, had been planning to attack concert-goers at Taylor Swift's show in Vienna with homemade explosives and knives. This, according to Austria's intelligence chief. Police say the 19-year-old had likely planned the attacks alone, but was in contact with a person who was slated to work at the concert venue. The foiled plot prompted the organizer to cancel all 3 shows in Vienna, part of the final leg of Taylor Swift's sold-out Eras tour. It's now a sprint through the key battleground states for Vice President Kamala Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Donald Trump, he sees the world differently than we see it. He has no understanding of service because he's too busy servicing himself.
Ohio Senator J.D. Vance was tailing the Democrats. He spoke with reporters by Vice President Kamala Harris's plane, Air Force Two near Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
We think it's important to get out there to talk to people, to make the best case that we can. And obviously there's an element of, especially local media is going to cover her because she's the vice president and a presumptive nominee. So we think it's important to have a counter narrative here, and importantly to drive home this point that she has been a dangerous radical.
Donald Trump, meantime, plans a news conference this afternoon at 2 Eastern. Bloomberg Radio and TV will carry that. Tropical storm Debbie making a second landfall in South Carolina. On its way up the East Coast, Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn tracking the storm.
John, the circulation associated with what's left of Debbie continues to produce very heavy rain over portions of the Carolinas, and this will be spreading into Virginia today. We're looking at numerous flash flood watches and some warnings from northeastern South Carolina across North Carolina, then up along the Appalachians all the way into central New York.
Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn. The Tulsa Fire Department has shared a video captured the moment a dog unknowingly sunk his teeth into a lithium-ion battery. This sparked a fire that quickly swept through an Oklahoma home. The pup is seen gnawing on the rechargeable cell phone battery as a second brown dog and black cat sit nearby in the owner's house. It took just a matter of seconds for the damaged battery to explode into a fiery blaze.
Wait, were they okay?
And the humans were okay too. But yes, the dogs escaped. They're probably in the pound right now. But
was the cat okay?
The cat and the dog, all the animals are okay. And yes, No humans were hurt, Alex.
Okay.
So,
I care about you, but look at the puppies and the kitty just sitting there being
no
like, whatever,
pandas
man.
were hurt either. There's the dog. Anyway.
Okay, good.
That's the latest from right here.
Thank
Alex
you.
and Paul.
Thank you so much, John. I mean, that is really. So here was a fun one. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Her name is Tennis. Her siblings are called Bowling and Baseball.
Nice.
Isn't that amazing? And Tennis just won a gold in Taekwondo.
Taekwondo. She won. Tennis triumphed in the 49-kilogram weight class in Taekwondo to become the first Thai athlete ever to win 2 Olympic gold medals. But I guess their parents are like fanatical sports people, so they name their kids after sports.
They're from Thailand, and they're so passionate that they did that. Apparently, her father competed in soccer, track, and swimming, while her mother was an aerobics instructor. So clearly, super fit, very athletic, and so they went bowling, baseball, and tennis.
What's telling in this article is, in the Wall Street Journal article, is that none of the kids play the sport after which they're named.
Isn't that funny?
So tennis does Taekwondo, and I don't know what the others do.
But I guess she tried to play tennis, and it just didn't work for her. I don't know.
One of the stories, I tell you, I think NBC does a great job with the Olympics, just kind of breaking down the stories, introducing you to people and stories from all over the world. Pretty cool, I think. Some people think that's a little cheesy, but I think it's
gets me
all
every
part
time.
of the Olympics. We've always
Dream job. I want to do those packages for the Olympics. I want to spend 4 years doing the Heartstrong packages.
I thought working with us was your dream job.
That is second dream job.
Good point.
I love those packages. Anyway, that wraps it up for me and Paul. Paul, have a great long weekend. I will be back with you tomorrow on the official Friday. Coming up, Joe Matthew with Balance of Power.
From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
The electoral map is moving. Welcome to the fastest show in politics, as Sabato's crystal ball now moves 3 important states into better position for Democrats just a day after the Cook Political Report did the same. We're joined by the crystal ball's Kyle Kondik at the University of Virginia Center for Politics with the rationale behind their changes. We'll look at the map together. Ukraine takes the fight to Putin, striking inside Russian territory. We'll have the latest on this from Bloomberg's Courtney McBride on Bloomberg's national security team. And as the Trump camp tries to swift boat Tim Walz, questioning his military credentials, we'll get into it with our signature panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us for the hour. We start, as always, on Wall Street. Look at stocks now with Charlie Pellet in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Joe Matthew. A lot of green on the screen today with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all surging. We've got stocks staging a major relief rally, bonds falling after the latest labor market reading this morning helped ease fears about a more protracted slowdown in the U.S. economy. All major groups in the S&P 500 index advancing, closing back in on 5,300, 5,292 right now on the S&P, up by about 1.8%. Dow up 524, now up 1.4%. NASDAQ up 365, a gain of 2.3%. Russell 2000 index of small cap shares up 1.8%. 10-year 3.98%. The 2-year 4.035%. Right now, spot gold is up by $36 the ounce, up 1.5%, while West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.9%. Now, what about the volatility that we have seen in recent sessions, indeed recent weeks? Where does one put money to work? Emily Rowland is Co-Chief Investment Officer at JH Investments.
We are using the moniker quality at a reasonable price. We want to own companies with great balance sheets, tons of cash, low interest burdens, and an ability to maintain profit margins.
Emily Rowland of JH Investments. Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg says he will be walking the main factory floor near Seattle on his first day and relocating to the city that forms the nucleus of the plane maker's activities to renew the bond with workers strung by crisis. That word in a memo to employees seen by Bloomberg News. Boeing shares today, right now we have got Boeing up by 2.3%, part of a broader rally with the S&P up 94 right now, up by 1.8%. Balance of Power continues now, the Thursday edition. What a week it has been. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Balance of Power. You made it to Little Friday. And an important conversation, as always, here on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite, and on YouTube, where you can find us right now. Search Bloomberg Global News, Bloomberg Business News Live, whatever. You'll see our live stream up there, and we'll meet you here in the studio. With important news today on the campaign trail, we have new polling and new strategy to talk about with our two tickets making their way across the country. Well, at least one ticket is. You've got Harris Walls on the roadshow, J.D. Vance hot on their heels. Then there's the news today from Ukraine, and it's very important, and I'm guessing you might not hear about it anywhere else, which is why we want to spend some time and, in fact, start on this with the amount of coverage that we've given to the war in Ukraine, the biggest incursion now into Russian territory since Russia started its war against Ukraine more than 2 years ago. Vladimir Putin confirming Ukrainian forces crossed the border into the Kursk region. He's making it sound like a pretty big deal here, describing an operation as a large-scale provocation. Up to 300 Ukrainian militants, 11 tanks, more than 200 armored vehicles. But again, that's Putin talking in the Kremlin. Let's get to the source right now. Courtney McBride is back with us at the table, of course, from Bloomberg's national security team here in Washington. Courtney, it's great to see you. What do we actually know about this cross-border incursion here?
Well, thanks for having me, Joe. As you said, I mean, this appears to be Ukraine's largest incursion into Russian territory. There have been some drone strikes on key targets, but this is the largest operation. The Ukrainians are not officially confirming many of the details, but as you said, Vladimir Putin has acknowledged that there is, in fact, a state of emergency declared in the Kursk region. We're also seeing, beyond the Russian acknowledgments of this apparent ground operation with tanks and armored vehicles, some concerns about a gas pipeline that runs through the area, and European gas prices are spiking on fears of a disruption.
We heard from John Kirby about this. Really interesting reaction. As he said, yeah, well, we kind of need to talk to our friends in Ukraine to find out what really happened, but was careful with the language that he used, knowing that we have a policy that limits the use of U.S.-made weapons against Russia. He said there have been no change in those limits that he said are restricted, quote, to target imminent threats just across the border, unquote. You could describe a lot of things that way, couldn't you?
One could. I mean, we've certainly seen similar verbiage from the State Department, from spokesperson Matt Miller. The U.S. is adamant that the policy hasn't changed and that the Ukrainians do not appear to be in violation of the policy. But they have, for some time, encouraged the U.S. to sort of take the shackles off and allow them to strike targets deeper into Russia using U.S.-provided weapons.
You wonder if we start seeing more of this now?
I mean, it remains to be seen. We'll see, whether this operation is a success, whether they can hold the territory if they gain it.
You can qualify a lot of things as an imminent threat, of course, and that helped to justify our providing F-16s to Ukraine. I guess technically they were from the Netherlands, but they'll be carrying U.S.-made weapons. And I bring it up because we actually saw an image of President Zelensky issued actual footage of these jets flying over Ukraine. So we know they have them. We know they're in the air. At what point are they operational?
Well, I mean, that remains to be seen. And, the U.S. and European partners are providing training, but it'll be up to the Ukrainians to decide how and when to employ them. I think a lot of officials, both in Ukraine and elsewhere, have sort of sought to temper expectations about the impact, given the limited numbers of aircraft and pilots.
And some even question the role it plays in the overall strategy here for Ukraine. Courtney, we haven't talked as much about Ukraine because we've spent so much time on what's happening in the Middle East, and this is a precarious moment now. I saw a statement from Tehran a few days ago saying that the delay in retaliation was part of the retaliation, that suggesting they're playing with the Israelis by waiting to respond to the attacks, the assassinations of the officials from Hamas and Hezbollah. Do we have any reason to believe this has been called off?
Not yet, but certainly the U.S. And allies and partners, not just in the region but in Europe, have been making their case for either a non-response or a more limited response from Iran. But as you said, part of this waiting game could be strategic. We really don't know. The Iranians have said that they are not looking for an all-out war, but that they have the right and the sort of legal justification to retaliate against Israel for these assassinations.
I suspect this could be an any moment thing. We'll run out in the newsroom and find you if we hear something. But keep us posted on what you're hearing. One of the most informed on our national security team, Courtney McBride. Thanks for coming in, Courtney. It's great to see you.
Thanks for
back here on Bloomberg Radio and on YouTube, where you can find us now. Search Bloomberg Global News. As I mentioned, our live stream is up and running as we balance all of this with the campaign trail. Of course, geopolitics, part of the conversation here, whether the campaigns want it to be or not. And we're looking at some motion here, more fluidity in the map. We talked yesterday about some moves by the Cook Political Report, and today it's the good people at Sabato's Crystal Ball, the Center for Politics. And we talk to, of course, Larry Sabato, Kyle Kondik, and the rest of the group pretty often here. So we pay attention when they start moving their ratings. And that's what's happening right now. Important states. We talk about the swing states that are going to decide this election. Here we go. In this case, Georgia. We're also talking about Minnesota and New Hampshire, and Kyle Kondik, the managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics, is with us to get into the rationale behind the changes. Kyle, it's good to see you. Thank you. Are these simply about the changes on the Democratic ticket, or is there more at play?
I think that's fundamentally what's going on. I think that Harris taking over has sort of restored the race to where it was several months ago, which was more of a true kind of 50-50 toss-up sort of race. I think the race kind of tilted to Trump following the first debate, and Harris has restored Democratic fortunes. And so, there's sort of there's like three different categories of states. They're all the states that voted for Trump in 2020. Trump is still favored in all those states, although North Carolina is maybe the shakiest part of that. There's all the states that voted for Biden by more than his national popular vote margin, 4.5 points. Those are all in the likely or safe Democratic columns in our ratings. And then you've got the 6 states that voted for Biden, but where he did worse than he did nationally. Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Those were all toss-ups for us. So, and that's really where I think the focus of the race is. Maybe North Carolina is a part of that. Maybe not, but I think we're talking about 6 or 7 states deciding this election.
You upgrade Democrats' chances, as I mentioned, in Minnesota here. Is that because of the selection of Tim Walz?
I think it has a little bit to do with it, although we probably would have done that anyway, given that the polling situation for Harris in Minnesota has gotten better. It's like the rising tide lifts all boats. So, she's pulled the sort of states at the center of the map back into toss-up status. And she's also, I think, restored the Democratic margin in places where I think the Trump campaign was talking about making moves prior to Biden getting out. But now I don't expect that they're going to do so unless, maybe this race evolves in such a way that Trump moves back into being the clear favorite. Maybe the Republicans feel like they could expand the battlefield now. But right now, again, I think the battlefield is those 6 or 7 states we're talking about.
Sure is. You're moving Georgia to toss up from leans Republican, which fulfills or helps to fulfill part of the narrative, Kyle, that the Sun Belt could be as friendly to Kamala Harris as the Rust Belt, or at least there might be another path there. How do you look at that since the change at the top?
Yeah, look, I think that Biden's map was more kind of closely focused on Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, given that he was generally behind in those Sun Belt states. That's not necessarily the case. Maybe Trump is still up, but, a tiny amount. There was a poll that came out this morning from AARP done by a Democratic and Republican pollster, 2 respected ones, and they had Trump up 46-44 in Georgia, which is pretty much a tie when you think about the margin of error. And there have been other polls that have shown the race basically tied in that state, with Harris doing better than Biden was doing. I got to be honest. So I think for a Democratic presidential nominee, I think if she loses any of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or Michigan, it'd be a really bad sign for her chances on election night. Maybe she could afford to lose Wisconsin and make up for it with like Georgia or Arizona. I do think if Harris loses either Pennsylvania or Michigan, I just don't really see a path to victory for her. I don't really see this being cracking open the Sun Belt but losing the Rust Belt. I just don't think that we should really expect something like that from history. Maybe that's how the campaign develops, but I think it's unlikely now.
Well, that's important analysis because that has been part of the more recent conventional wisdom here. Either way you cut it, Kyle, the Harris-Walz campaign is looking at the swing states. We count 7 here in our poll at Bloomberg. You're looking basically at 6 in the form of toss-ups on your map. And the campaign is up with a new ad. Of course, they're just getting some of these ad campaigns off the ground here, only been in business for 2 weeks or so. We got our look at a new one here. This is targeting Latino voters in swing states. Kyle, just a taste of the ad here. We'll have you respond.
When you're raised by an immigrant mother, you learn what's possible with determination.
And determination is how Kamala Harris
went from working in McDonald's to prosecutor,
State Attorney General,
U.S. Senator, and our Vice President in only 1 generation.
That is decidedly, Kyle, not an ad that the Trump campaign could make for Donald Trump in this case. Where are we here in the effort to out-identify each other when it comes to Kamala Harris?
I sort of wonder about messaging like that because I think sometimes Democrats can sort of fall in this trap of playing this sort of like, I don't know, sort of like pan-racial identity messaging, specifically Latino voters. And I think there's some people who follow that particular demographic who don't necessarily think that's the right way of doing it. Now, of course, they're just trying to introduce Harris here, but I think it's important for the campaign to recognize that, Latino voters have the same concerns that lots of other different kinds of voters do. And I've seen some criticism of that kind of messaging from people who study the Latino vote. So I'm interested to see how they do that. Certainly, it's important for the Democrats to specifically focus on Latino voters because, there was some real erosion there in 2020 compared to 2016, and you could imagine that continuing.
Pan-racial is an interesting term, Kyle. Do these not poll well, or do you just question the optics of the strategy?
Well, look, again, I'm maybe I'm out a little bit ahead of my skis here, just because I wouldn't consider myself a specific expert in that particular group, but just in sort of reading about messaging with Latino voters over the years, there was some criticism, I think, of how Clinton and Biden kind of message to Latino audiences, kind of talking about almost the sort of Latino identity as part of the messaging. And there's some thought that maybe that's not the right way to go about it. But again, I would defer also to people who study this particular group more in depth.
Spending time with Kyle Kondik at Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics. And I can't talk to you, Kyle, without drilling down ballot a little bit here. We had an important primary night this week. Saw Cori Bush dispatched in a primary. And next week, we're looking at Ilhan Omar in a primary battle in her home state. I just wonder where you think we are here and what we're learning in the composite of these results that have followed the presidential campaign being settled, but are still showing some pretty important political battles here on the state and congressional levels.
Yeah, there's been this sort of battle between, I guess, AIPAC or forces associated with AIPAC and some of the more progressive left-wing members of Congress who are, more suspicious of Israel, I guess, in the sort of ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And, we saw Jamal Bowman lose in New York recently, and now we've seen Cori Bush lose to a candidate who maybe kind of ran against her, maybe more from the center. Now, I think also Bowman and Bush had other problems beyond, raising the ire of AIPAC. Going into the primary season, it seemed like of the so-called squad that Bush and Bowman were the ones who were the most vulnerable, and that's sort of borne out in how this worked out. Omar didn't necessarily seem to be in as bad a shape as Bowman and Bush were. I guess we're going to find out next week.
We shall. And we'd love to stay in touch with you on all of this. Really interesting on these 3 states. Kyle, thank you for being here. Kyle Kondik at Sabado's Crystal Ball with great analysis here on Balance of Power. On Bloomberg, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, where we keep tabs on the markets for you, too. It's been a much better day today. The S&P 500, of course, things can change in the late going, as we've seen repeatedly this week. The S&P 500 up almost 2% now, 97 points. NASDAQ's ahead by 2.5%. And we'll get an update on the markets straight ahead by Charlie Pellet. Mike Dorning joins us from Bloomberg's political team here in Washington straight ahead with not just the campaign, but what in the world Congress might do when it comes back to town. Do you remember Congress? Much more ahead on the fastest show in politics, the Thursday edition. This is Bloomberg.
It's 12:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. We begin with a developing story and a headline right off the Bloomberg Professional Service involving Apple. Apple is changing App Store terms. In response to the European Union, Apple will let developers offer products outside of its ecosystem. Again, those headlines crossing the Bloomberg right now. Apple shares on a broad tech rally. Apple shares up today by 1.6%. Solid rebound on this jobless claims Thursday. Bonds falling after the latest latest labor market reading helped ease fears about a more pronounced slowdown in the U.S. economy. All major groups in the S&P 500 are advancing. S&P right now up 103. The S&P back above 5,300, 5,302, just about the high of the day right now, with a 2% gain in the S&P 500 index. As Joe mentioned, going to be very key to find out how things shake out at the close. Dow Industrials up 569, up 1.5%. We've got NASDAQ up now by 2.5%. NASDAQ 100 index up 2.7%. Broad-based rally with the Russell 2000 index up now by 1.8%. 10-year 3.99%. The 2-year 4.04%. Gold up $38 the ounce, up 1.6% at $24.20 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude up now by 1.1%, 76.08 a barrel on WTI. Eli Lilly moving ahead in the race to dominate the red-hot obesity market as rival Novo Nordisk struggles to keep up with demand. Lilly up 7.7% right now. ADRs of Novo Nordisk, they're up by 4.9%. Again, recapping, big rally underway just about the highs of the day now, with the S&P up 102, a gain of 2%. Balance of power continues. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Matthew.
Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. His eye on the markets for us every day here on the fastest show in politics. It's good to have you. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. There's a high-speed car chase going on today in L.A. because it's a day that ends in Y, and it does tend to capture my attention. I'm like a bug drawn to the light with things like these. But as we bring in Mike Dorning for his take on the presidential campaign and some of the action that we've been seeing down ballot in some of these congressional races, it does remind me, of course, of the chase that's happening across the country right now in the presidential campaign. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, hitting all the battleground states. We told you, right? 7 cities, 5 days. And J.D. Vance is following them. He even showed up on the tarmac outside Kamala Harris's jet yesterday. Air Force Two is idling, and here comes the senator from Ohio. Mike Dorning, it's good to see you at the table.
Great to be here, as always.
I guess that's old-fashioned politics, right? You try to match them city for city, try to blunt the headlines?
Yeah, especially because in local media, you have a vice presidential candidate showing up. At least you get a counterpoint in there. And this is particularly important in this introductory tour where these kind of figures that most people don't know that well, Kamala Harris and Governor Walz, are being introduced to these swing states. At least you have Vance there as a rebuttal on their first impression.
You sort of have to have a plan, though, right? It seemed like the dog that caught the car a little bit yesterday. He walked over to Kamala Harris's jet. Nobody came to the door. So he went over to the press corps on the tarmac, and he said, I'm here to call on Kamala Harris to do a news conference because, you guys ought to be able to ask her more questions. And no one said anything. So he kind of walked away. Is that effective politics in this era of slice and dice on Twitter?
It's probably not as effective as it might be, but right now the Trump-Vance campaign is kind of flailing for their message to counter Harris and Walz. I mean, eventually they'll probably come up with something that's more effective, but there's a huge opportunity cost here because they're not having an effect